1342 UK time. 05122024. People.
I don't think a woman, believer and go. Cause temporary lovers comes and go. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're the only woman that I ever know. She's got me losing control. Oh, I don't wanna dream about you. Oh, the way you are. Oh, I wish my heart could be without you. But am I going to go? Say I need you. You think that I need you, all the love you're giving, and I need you. Cause living alone is a free of living alone. Na na na, never been to me. Chop your mother line, over with the pictures, alright. Chop your mother line, over with me tonight. Love the way on your squeeze. Yes, I love the way you romance me. I love the way on you hold me. Baby, me, I beg you, release me. I'm a champion, Babylon, yeah. Over with the princess, alright. Bubble, I want you back. Bubble, let me say. Bubble, I want you back. Bubble, let me say. All night long we keep dancing. I didn't know the time it was passing. And as I look out the window, yesterday turned into tomorrow. Champion bubble on day. Bubble with the princess alright. Champion bubble on day. I love the way you squeeze me tight. Bubble, 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 away there. Bubble, 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 let me say. Bubble, bubble, you must smile what you say, hard. I so far hope that is what you know. And you must smile when you are run up your mouth. You hold a mouth, it will get you out. You must smile, you must smile, and you must smile when you walk and talk. You see a man face, but you don't see sun. You must smile, you must smile, you must be careful about the things you say. Mind your mouth, to go astray. If your bad mind, then you must get away. You must smile, you must smile, you got to be careful, whoa. Got to be careful, yeah. Got to be careful, whoa. Got to be careful, yeah. So you must mind what you say, although there's an eyes of a book that is watching you. And you must find out you are running up your mouth. You hold that mouth, it will get you out. You must smile, you must smile, and then it's a time, yeah. And that is a time, yeah.
Right now, the story I'm
You must smile,
John, for the money for family style. Never work, see? So me say, "True, you gonna do it. No call, no phone. Suppose you want to pick it up in their business. Oh, yeah. It is you I'm talking to, Lord. What a whole heap of more. What a whole heap of more. Me should be falling on me yard, if we keep crush on. While up me parrot with me having the car. And we be belly full, man, me lay down on the yard. What a whole heap of more. So what a whole heap of more. If a man a informer, we call him come. Step on me clocks, find a hurt of me come. Give it to the young baby we just born. What a whole heap of more. Say what a whole heap of more. Because they pick it up already and they down your belly. The one like a big tough rough and ready. What a whole heap of more. Say what a whole heap of more. Come again. They say me fooling on me yard, me a big crush down. While up me porridge with me having the calm. I'm on a informer, we call him calm. I be long fire shot and we call him calm. The kitty to the dick, them Lord just gone. In on the yard, I be full up a calm. What a whole heap of more. So if me bowling on me hand, me a go feet so full. One white fowl, one black fowl. One night me kill and one night out. What a whole heap of more. Tell you what a whole heap of more. It is you I'm talking to, Lord. What a whole heap of more. Tell you what a whole heap of more.
Black chocolate, some girl of black chocolate, some girl of black chocolate. Sipping with my leg, they want black chocolate. Sipping with Akari, they want black chocolate. Sipping with Rosary, want black chocolate. But hey, yo, girl, I want you listen to this. Remember, little Jalad, you don't run this. Remember, little Jalad, you don't run this. Black chocolate. Some girl have black chocolate. Some girl have black chocolate. Oh, well. They love the black traffic. Ooh, they love the black traffic. They love the black traffic. Well, true they don't say me and that. Them no want me be a no profile. True they don't say me and that. Them no want me be a no profile. But I want you to listen and understand, yeah. But one man to 10 women, I want you to know that it's a natural fact, yeah. So black traffic, class, some girl a black traffic, class, some girl a black traffic. See me with Rosie, don't black traffic. You see me with Anne-Marie, don't black
Armani, you set up broke hell. I like just that, Jack. You keep your mouth shut. I'm gonna go there and slap your face. I ain't leaving. I'll wear a $15,000 Rolex and you get on Space Mountain. You'll be like this. And now, you and I are living the ride. Jet fly. Keep stealing. Wheeling dealing. Son of a gun. Oh, who are you? Never tell me how to wrestle. Bright lights. Big cities. I am Ric Flair, the President of the United States. That kissed all the girls in the neighborhood and made them cry. Just stealing, wheeling, dealing, Cashmere, woo, 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 woo. I dressed myself in $100 freedom flags. Who made this coat? Hugo Boss, Armani, you set up broke hell. I like just that, Jack. You keep your mouth shut. I'm gonna go there and slap your face. I ain't leaving. I'll wear a $15,000 Rolex and you get on Space Mountain. You'll be like this. And now, you and I are living the ride. Jet fly. Keep stealing. Wheeling dealing. Son of a gun. Oh, who are you? Never tell me how to wrestle. Bright lights. Big cities. I am Ric Flair, the President of the United States.
Mermaid Corn Surprise! So adorable! 6 to collect with over 35 surprises, including cute accessories and treasures for you. Boo Boo Corns and magical glitter horns, too. Rainbow Corns Mermaid Corn Surprise from Zero.
Anancy and the Sky Kingdom, as told by Bobby Norfolk, illustrated by Baird Hoffmeyer. The world was dark, without light. The animals couldn't hunt or even see their children. King Lion called to the animals, "Who will go to the king of the sky and ask for light?" Eagle screamed, "Me! I can fly the highest." Off he went into the clouds, but Eagle could not fly high enough. Monkey chattered, "Me! I can climb into the sky." Off he went into the trees, but Monkey could not climb high enough. "Me!" boomed the elephant. "Me, me, me!" called all the big animals, but they all failed. Finally, Anancy the spider came forward. "Me! I can spin a web into the sky." "You!" laughed King Lion. "No, Anancy, you're too little." "I may be tiny," Anancy replied, "but my friends and I can do anything if we work together." The animals laughed, but King Lion roared, "Enough! We shall see what Anancy and his friends can do." Anancy called out, "Ant, fly! Let's go." Anancy began to weave a web from the earth. It stretched high into the clouds. "Ant, you and I will climb up the web and fly will join us. You can bite an opening into the Sky Kingdom," explained Anancy. Up the clouds. Crunch shoot an opening in the clouds, and the three friends crawled into the Sky Kingdom. They were surrounded by bright light and beautiful colors. Suddenly, the king of the sky stood in front of them. "What do you want here?" the king demanded. "We have come for light, king," said Anancy. "Will you please share it with the earth below?" "Well, share," said the king, "but you must prove that you are worthy. You must first pass 3 tests." "We can pass any test," declared Anancy. "Tell us what to do." "Wait here," said the king. "My wise men and I will prepare the tests." The king and his wise men went into a golden tent. "Oh, how I wish I could be a fly on the wall of that tent," said Anancy. "I can be a fly on the wall." But he slide and zipped into the tent to listen. They will ask us to cut down. They will ask us to cut down every blade of grass in that huge field over there before sunrise tomorrow, Fly cried when he came out. Fly showed them an area the size of a football field. "It's impossible. We're doomed," cried Fly. "Well, the 3 of us can't do it, but Ant's family can," Anancy said. "Yes, my family can cut down every blade," Ant yelled. And he ran down Anancy's web to get his mother and his father and his 77 sisters and 82 brothers and all of his cousins and aunts and uncles. Chomp, chomp, crunch, crunch, crunch. Every blade of grass was cut and all the weak ants had slid back down the web when the sun came up the next day. The king huffed. "Well, that was the easiest test. We shall prepare the next task." Again, Fly followed the king and his wise men into the tent. Soon Fly zoomed back out. "Oh no," he moaned. "We must eat all of the fruit on the trees in the orchard between sunset tonight and sunrise tomorrow." Fly showed them 1,000 fruit trees. "We're doomed," Ant moaned. "The 3 of us can't do it, but Fly's family surely can," Anancy said. "Go invite them to a feast." Fly slid down to earth and brought his hungry family to the orchard. Thousands of flies swarmed into the trees and began to eat. The king was furious when he saw the empty fruit trees. "You must still pass our last test," he bellowed. Again, Fly fly became a fly on the wall. He hurried out to buzz into Anancy's ear. Choose the gray box. Just as the king and his wise men carried 2 boxes out of the tent. This is the final test, said the king. There's light in one of these boxes. If you choose correctly, it is yours. He held out a small gray box and a huge yellow one. Anancy looked at the boxes. He sniffed it. He turned them and shook them. Anancy pointed to the gray box. This box, he yelled. The king was enraged. Take it and go, he shouted. Anancy, ant, and fly grabbed the box and rushed down the web. The big spirit, the king lion lifted the top off the box. Nothing but a rooster came out. Then a rooster puffed out his chest and crowed. For the first time, the sun rose brightly into the sky. Anancy, ant, and fly said proudly, when we work together, we can do anything.
Pixel 8a with Google AI. Choose your best look with best take.
On June 18, 2013, reports emerged about a tragic car accident that resulted in the untimely demise of Michael Hastings, a 33-year-old American journalist and author. Rumors and speculation regarding a potential conspiracy theory and subsequent cover-up began to circulate. The reason behind this conjecture stems from Michael Hastings' reputable career, particularly his notable and critical coverage of the Iraq War for Newsweek magazine during the early 2000s. Earning significant acclaim, his 2010 article titled The Runaway General, published in Rolling Stone magazine, garnered widespread attention. This article shed light on the disapproval of General Stanley McChrystal and his team towards civilian government officials, including then Vice President Joe Biden and several other prominent figures of the Obama administration. Inevitably, the publication of the article led to the resignation of the highly respected General McChrystal, who before the then President Obama put him in charge of the war in Afghanistan, had spent 5 years running the Pentagon's most secretive black ops.
Today I accepted General Stanley McChrystal's resignation as commander of the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. I did so with considerable regret. Indeed, it saddens me to lose the service of a soldier who I've come to respect and admire.
Continuing his career's upward trajectory, Michael Hastings garnered even more public and government attention through his outspoken criticism of the Obama administration's Department of Justice investigation targeting political reporters in 2013. Hastings and other journalistic figures voiced concern about the measures which were taking place.
Some of our longtime trusted sources have become nervous and anxious about talking to us, even on stories that aren't about national security. Government employees that we once checked in with regularly will no longer speak to us by phone, and some are reluctant to meet in person. Now, the government may love this. I suspect they do. But beware the government that loves secrecy too much.
Vocal in his condemnation, Hastings labeled the imposed restrictions and the subpoenaing of phone records from the Associated Press as the ominous inception of an assault on free journalism.
The Obama administration has clearly declared war on the press. It's declared war on investigative journalists, our sources. I think the only recourse to this kind of behavior by the government is to say back to the government, we declare war on you, and from this point forward, we should no longer, as a media as a whole, cooperate in any manner with the government in terms of when we're doing national security stories.
On June 7th, 2013, BuzzFeed published what would ultimately become Michael Hastings' final piece, an article provocatively titled, Why Democrats Love to Spy on Americans. The article delved into an intense discussion and critique of the Democratic Party and their involvement in what he described as a burgeoning surveillance state. At certain junctures, Hastings even likens the methods employed by the White House to those reminiscent of North Korea. The article elicited considerable attention and scrutiny, adding to the significance of Hastings' already impactful journalistic legacy. In the days leading up to his untimely death, Michael Hastings reportedly had an ongoing investigation into the CIA Director John Brennan as part of a new story he was working on. Hours before he passed away the following morning, the award-winning journalist sent emails to various colleagues, letting them know that his close friends and associates were being interviewed by the FBI, perhaps to give his friends a heads up that they may also be interviewed. He then expressed his intention to temporarily go off radar. This revelation understandably adds to the sense of suspicion surrounding the tragic event. Could this pursuit of a new expose have been the driving force behind an assassination plot? Many find this scenario highly plausible. Adding to the intrigue, WikiLeaks further fueled speculations when they disclosed that Hastings had contacted their lawyer mere hours before the fatal crash, informing her of an FBI investigation into his activities. However, the FBI later refuted this assertion, causing some uncertainty about the true circumstances surrounding the journalist's demise. But I think it's fair to say that now we've got to a point where even if that statement was true, there will always be doubt. A mere 11 days after the publication of the thought-provoking BuzzFeed article, Michael Hastings tragically lost his life in that fateful car crash. The incident occurred at 4:20 a.m. in a Los Angeles neighborhood. One witness described the car as moving fast, leaving a trail of questions and curiosity in its wake. Why was he driving so fast? Was he trying to get away from someone? News articles described the crash as being intense, due to the fact that the car's engine and transmission were found 100 feet away from the main wreckage. Although the official ruling labeled the incident as an accident, Richard A. Clarke, a national security expert and former government official, introduced an alternative perspective. He proposed the possibility that Michael Hastings' car might have been subject to hacking, thereby, although not explicitly, raising questions about the authenticity of the accident narrative by stating, "It's relatively easy to hack your way into the control system of a car and do such things as cause acceleration when the driver doesn't want acceleration. You can do some really highly destructive things now through hacking a car, and it's not that hard." However, he also added that he was not suggesting that there actually was a hack in this particular incident. Looking further into the feasibility of car hacking, we found this old news report.
Two professional hackers armed with only laptops and an internet connection remotely broke into the internal system of this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. They took control of the Jeep's locks, the steering, the speedometer, even disabled the brakes.
And to make things a little stranger and more suspicious, we found reports that at 12:30 a.m. on the morning he died, Hastings had apparently asked his neighbor and friend, Jordana Thigpen, for use of her car, as he had some concern that his own car had been tampered with, to which she had to decline, as her own car was having mechanical issues. Another worrying detail that she added was that he was scared and he wanted to leave town. The next she heard of him was the news that he had died. A video of the morbidly spectacular fire engulfing the Mercedes-Benz C250 coupe further fueled the speculation of sabotage, suggesting that an incendiary device may have played a role in the cause of the crash and the fire that followed. Other reports detailing the incident shed light on Michael Hastings' personal struggles, disclosing that he seemed to be experiencing a setback following a commendable 14-year period of sobriety from substance abuse. Simultaneously, he grappled with renewed episodes of paranoia. Interestingly, accounts from his earlier years suggest that he had informally been recognized as having bipolar disorder during his teenage years. Could these disclosures have just been an attempt to smear his character, to make it seem more likely that he himself was solely responsible for the crash? If you look back in almost anyone's past, it could be possible to find something that might change your opinion of them in the present day. 14 years is a long time ago, and Michael had come a long way since then. And as for his renewed sense of paranoia, perhaps this feeling was more than justified. The autopsy conducted after his tragic passing unveiled the presence of both marijuana and amphetamine in his system at the time of the crash. However, the report notably underscores that these substances were deemed unlikely to have played a role in causing the accident. Alarmingly, though, the body was cremated immediately after the autopsy, and we say alarming because this was not authorized by his family.
Meaning he was cremated, and it wasn't the request of the family that went forward and asked for something like that. In fact, the family wanted Michael's body to go home. It's shocking for a couple of reasons. If there was any evidence in his, body at the time of death,
drugs,
anything, that's gone. That evidence is now all gone.
His widow, Elise Jordan, believes that the way he met his end was truly a tragic accident, saying in a TV interview with CNN,
"Right now, the LAPD still has an active investigation. I don't really have anything to add. My gut here is that it was just a really tragic accident, and I'm very unlucky, and the world was very unlucky."
While those who are intimately connected to Michael Hastings seem like they've put their faith in the officially declared account of events, it's inevitable that there will persist those people who struggle to embrace such conclusions, especially in cases like this, where the circumstances surrounding the event, as well as the information available, all seem to suggest something far more sinister than a mere accident. What do you think? On June 18, 1977, Charles Morgan's body was found near his car on a desert road in Tucson, Arizona, about 40 miles west of his family home. At the time his body had been discovered, authorities estimated that his life had ended roughly 12 hours earlier, with a single bullet fired at close range to the back of his head. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, a gun holster, and carrying a concealed knife. It would seem Charles had come prepared for a confrontation. There was also a supply of ammunition found inside his car, as well as other weapons and sets of handcuffs. Was he planning on detaining someone? Rather strangely, one of his own teeth was found wrapped up in a tissue in his car, as well as a pair of sunglasses, which were later determined to belong to someone else. Another strange detail discovered by local investigators was that his car had been modified so that it could be unlocked from the fender. Why would such a modification be made? Also, there was a map with directions of how to get to the location his murder took place, which may indicate that this area wasn't familiar to him. Another strange piece of evidence which was discovered was a $2 bill which was pinned to his underwear. What made this $2 bill even stranger was that it had 7 Spanish names listed beginning with the letters A through G, as well as a Bible citation, which said Ecclesiastes 12, with arrows pointing at the 1 and 8 on the serial number. On the back of the bill, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were each numbered 1 through 7. Furthermore, there was a rough map of some roads that led between Tucson and the Mexican border, leading to a place called Robles Junction and a town called Sasabe, an area that investigators believe was likely involved in smuggling, as the area had a small farm, which also had a few aeroplane landing strips. Later examinations established that Morgan had been shot with his own .357 Magnum, which was found next to him, but no fingerprints at all could be found on the gun. At this point, you might ask yourself, who was Chuck Morgan, and why had this happened to him? How did he come to end up like this, with all those bizarre details and puzzling pieces of evidence? Would you find it hard to believe that it was concluded that Chuck took his own life? If so, you're not the only one. Sit back and get ready to hear all about one of the USA's most cryptic cases, one which many still believe is unsolved and unexplained. With all the evidence gathered at the scene, you may have thought that 39-year-old Charles Morgan, or Chuck as he liked to be called, was probably some kind of experienced or hardened criminal gang member. However, that really wasn't the case. Chuck was a family man with a wife and 4 daughters. He also had a successful business and escrow agency in Tucson, Arizona, of which he was the president. So on the surface, he was not really the typical criminal type. Well, at least not the type that turns up to off-road meetings with a gun, knife, and bulletproof vest anyway. But as we all know, looks can be deceiving. On the morning of March 22nd, Chuck drove the 2 youngest of his 4 daughters to school before heading to work like any other ordinary day. However, after dropping the 2 girls off, Chuck simply vanished, leaving his family puzzled and worried about what could have possibly happened to him. On March 25th, 3 long days after he went missing, Chuck came back home limping and in a rather terrible state. His wife Ruth recalls Chuck was missing a shoe, had a set of plastic handcuffs wrapped around one of his ankles, and his hands were bound together with a plastic zip tie. He was pointing at his throat, indicating he was unable to speak, so he wrote down on a piece of paper that he had been kidnapped and tortured. He also explained that he had a hallucinogenic drug poured down his throat, and if he ingested it fully, his nervous system would have totally been destroyed, causing either his immediate death or irreversible insanity. Chuck refused to reveal who had abducted and tortured him, and simply wrote down instructions for Ruth to move his car from outside, as he didn't want them to know that he had come home. He also didn't want to reveal who they were. Ruth moved the car, then came back inside and went to go and call the police, but Chuck stopped her immediately and wrote down, "If you call the cops, they'll kill all of us, even the girls." Morgan unveiled the secret behind a seemingly ordinary life and confessed to his wife that he was an undercover agent working for the federal government, specifically for the Treasury Department, which is the department responsible for maintaining systems that are critical to the nation's financial infrastructure. Chuck claimed that he had been helping them fight organized crime, with a focus on money laundering in particular. He told Ruth that the unidentified people who had captured him had taken his Treasury ID. What they planned to do with it exactly wasn't so clear. He also told Ruth that he was aware that a lot of laundering was taking place in the town, but added he was not involved in it himself. For the following week, Ruth nursed her husband by feeding him with an eyedropper, but although he physically recovered from this dreadful experience and his voice returned, he just wasn't the same. He was still a mental wreck and understandably very paranoid. Chuck turned into a tormented soul and started wearing a bulletproof vest every day in fear for his life. He also feared for the safety of his daughters and insisted that he drove them to and from school and informed them that nobody other than himself was authorized to collect them from the school. 2 months of what seemed like relative normality went by, and just when it seemed that the Morgan family could finally leave that dreadful episode behind them, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. On June 7th, Chuck disappeared again while on his way to work after visiting his parents early one morning. That was the last morning that any of his loved ones saw him again. He had gone to his parents' home specifically to speak to his father. He told him that if anything happens to him, there was a letter hidden in the house that would explain everything. He told his father not to tell Ruth about the letter, at least, not while he was still alive anyway, as he believed the less she knew, the safer she would be. 9 days after Chuck had gone missing, his wife received a phone call from a mysterious woman who said, "Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8. The most interesting part of those verses reads, "Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." I'm no theologian, but this sounds very much like a reference to facing something bad or some kind of danger, but having faith in God that all will be well in the long run. But it definitely has a more hidden significance here. But what is it? Did the caller assume that Ruth would know? We'd be interested to hear your thoughts. It's obviously not just a coincidence that there are 7 Spanish names listed, and then 7 signers of the Declaration of Independence. The real question now is how the 2 sets of names relate to each other, and then how both relate to Ecclesiastes 12, verse 1-8. 2 days after receiving that cryptic message, Chuck's body was found. Did the caller assume Chuck really was going to be okay? If not, why make the phone call at all? Just to give his wife peace of mind, perhaps, if only for a short time. Charles Morgan's death was officially ruled to have been from a self-inflicted gun wound, but his wife refused to believe that he would be capable of doing such a thing. She simply believes that he wouldn't want to leave his family behind, least of all without writing a letter to each of them. So what really happened to him? How would he possibly shoot himself in the back of the head? People who do sadly make this kind of decision for themselves don't typically aim the gun here. Also, it seems rather bizarre that he would get kitted out with a bulletproof vest, only to go and do something like that. In an episode of the old TV series Unsolved Mysteries, investigator and journalist Don Devereaux, who was looking into the suspicious death of Charles, justly stated, "It is not a very normal place to shoot oneself. I've never seen in all my years as a journalist a fellow taking himself out in a desert wearing a bulletproof vest and shooting himself in the back of the head." Did Chuck really decide to end his own life, leaving behind a trail of mysterious clues, while being a potential witness in fraud and laundering cases? There are so many peculiar details that emerged during the investigation, and also during our research. One being the fact that Morgan was right-handed, but gun residue was found on his left hand. The fact that the gun residue was found on his hand is probably the reason why investigators lean towards the idea that he shot himself. But isn't it possible he had fired the gun at someone beforehand? The fact that there were no fingerprints on his gun should surely end the theory that he did this to himself, since, if he shot himself, he wouldn't have been able to wipe the fingerprints off the gun, would he? Chuck was clearly trying to protect himself with the vest, the knife, the gun, etc. So why would he end himself then? Also, some of the evidence found at the scene points towards someone else being present when Chuck died. More specifically, the sunglasses. Who did they belong to? How was it determined that they didn't belong to him? They could easily be dismissed as belonging to a friend who left them there, but nobody came forward to claim them. Another interesting fact is that Arizona is the only state that allowed blind trust ownership of real estate. According to this law, people could buy a property without being traced. Therefore, an escrow agent, such as Morgan, was the only person who knew an owner's identity in cases like this. At the time of his disappearance, Morgan was apparently doing escrow work for two alleged organized crime groups, the Ned Warren family and the Joe Bonanno family. Could it be possible that the mob got rid of him as he could reveal their identity and whereabouts? Maybe, but the mafia is not known historically to use drugs or hallucinogens for its hits, or torture for that matter. They would just break bones or kill the person to send a direct and clear message to everyone. Also, why would they phone his wife and leave a Bible reference? Interestingly, one organization that has a history with hallucinogens is the CIA. Was it a cover story, just like the more recent mysterious death of MI6 agent Gareth Williams in 2010? Perhaps Morgan may have found out something someone didn't want him to know, so they had him killed and then bribed or threatened the police. When Unsolved Mysteries covered the case in the 90s, Lieutenant Curtis of the Prima County Sheriff's Department gave an interview which may support this theory. He said he knew Sheriff's Department intelligence officers who were working the case at the time. They thought the case really was a homicide and gang-related. He added that the individuals who he spoke to eventually left the department because of what they detected in this case and other cases combined, and that those same officers were in fear for their lives and eventually left law enforcement. Two of these individuals apparently even left the country. What about the unidentified woman who called Ruth 2 days before he was found? A few days after Morgan's death, the woman came forward and made herself known to police as Green Eyes. She told them that she had known Morgan and that she had seen him after he disappeared during the 9 days before his death. According to Green Eyes, Morgan showed her a briefcase with a lot of money in it, saying that he was going to use that money to buy off a hitman who had been hired to murder him. Morgan had told Green Eyes that in the briefcase there was a $90,000 contract out on his life that was escalating at the rate of $5,000 per day. Also, what happened to the letter Chuck had hidden in the house? Well, apparently, that letter has never been found, so we have no idea what information Chuck left behind, or if there ever was a letter at all. However, not long after Chuck's death, two men claiming to be FBI agents went to visit the Morgan family's home and abruptly turned the house upside down, searching for something, without giving any explanations to his wife, who felt extremely intimidated during the entire ordeal. Did those FBI agents find the letter and take it away, as it contained some information which was not to be disclosed? Perhaps the letter contained some sort of evidence that could have brought down some powerful people. Reporter Don Devereaux was on a mission to find out the truth, and one day he made a Freedom of Information Act request to the FBI regarding Morgan's case. And this is where another bizarre turn came. The FBI claimed that they had never even heard of Charles Morgan, and there was no file on him at all. Nevertheless, they opened an investigation and searched his house, and even interviewed Morgan's attorney. How do you explain that? Who were those men who had searched the house before? And who were they working for? Perhaps Chuck really was indeed an undercover federal agent working against the mob. Or was he working for them? Did the authorities help to cover up his mysterious death? Who was Green Eyes? A secret woman in his life? Or a fellow agent? Or just someone with connections to organized crime? What was that Bible passage meant to indicate? And what about all the other strange details? The tooth, the $2 bill. While the death of Charles Morgan may have been officially deemed to have been from a self-inflicted gun wound to the head, many people, understandably, think this case reached the wrong conclusion. Following the episode of Unsolved Mysteries, over 600 calls came into their call center. Don Devereaux investigated every one of them. Between 1973 and when he was killed in 1977, Morgan was allegedly heavily involved in money laundering and doing large transactions in gold and platinum. And by large, we're talking amounts in excess of $1 billion a year in gold alone, the source of which was apparently Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975. Murkier details came in, suggesting the involvement of either corrupt or undercover individuals from the US intelligence community. Some of the tips also mentioned involvement of Vietnamese government officials who were going into exile. The calls also led Devereaux to discover what was perhaps the trigger behind his elimination. Charles had apparently kept a set of duplicate records of all the dodgy dealings. While Morgan seemed to think that the duplicates would be some kind of protection, it proved to be that he had unintentionally sealed his own doom. To the criminals he was working for, it probably made him seem like an untrustworthy risk, and that was a risk none of those shady individuals wanted to take. For Don Devereaux, and anyone else familiar with the case, all this new alleged information clearly pointed out that Charles Morgan met his demise because he knew too much. Just as the story seems like it's taken as many twists as it could, more would emerge, 13 years after the death of Chuck Morgan. At around midnight on May 14, 1990, 35-year-old Doug Johnston was found dead in his car in his computer graphics company car park. He had suffered a single gun wound behind his left ear from a distance estimated to have been at least 12 inches. At first, local authorities believed Doug turned the gun on himself. However, he was right-handed, there was no powder residue on his hands, and there was no gun found at the scene. Johnston's family and friends also could not and did not believe that Doug could have taken his own life. He had just completed a computer-aided drafting course and had graduated with honours and had even secured a job. Everything was going well for him. What's really interesting, and where the possible connection comes from, is that Johnston had a similar-looking house and drove a similar car to the crime journalist Don Devereaux, who lived across the street from the car park where Doug was killed. As a result, Devereaux took interest in the investigation and began to follow it, but eventually lost track of it over the course of the year. During the year after the death of Doug Johnston, Devereaux was contacted by Washington-based writer Dan Casolaro, who had requested he share some of his findings in relation to Morgan's death and dealings prior to it. Don agreed to do so. However, Dan Casolaro was found dead in a hotel room just before he could receive the information. Interestingly, according to Casolaro's brother, Dan was afraid of blood, and it would seem unlikely then that he would choose to end his life by inflicting a deep wound to his own wrists, as medical examiners had determined he did so. Furthermore, to add extra doubt, as if you even needed it, Dan's brother was a doctor, and he said that in the past Dan was reluctant to even allow him to prick his finger to take the smallest of blood samples. Many believe that Doug was killed after he was mistaken for Devereaux, and that Devereaux was targeted for his investigation in Charles's case, and this was somewhat confirmed 6 months after Dan Casolaro's death. In a phone call from one of his journalist connections, Devereaux was told that he was in fact the intended target that night. This information being relayed to him came from what was apparently a reliable source in the CIA. The caller also informed Devereaux that there have been, and there still are, contracts out to kill you. He also went on to suggest that this was due to his work supposedly being a threat to not just the mob in Phoenix, but also the CIA. Could it be that the CIA needed to silence him in order to keep him from interrupting their own investigations? Or were those particular agents rogue and just as dirty as the mob? Well, things got even stranger when later 2 more sources, another from the CIA and one from Israeli intelligence, confirmed the death threats. What had Devereaux really found? It sounds like he was onto something bigger than he ever realized, and that Doug Johnston was very likely the innocent victim of a contract hit meant for Devereaux due to his work, which started with the mysterious death of Charles Morgan.
Who we gonna be today? The whole world watching.
The setting for our next case is Silver Plume, Colorado, a small town nestled cozily in the lap of America's Rocky Mountains. Back in 1987, the population was around 130, and one of those residents was a man by the name of Tom Young, an Army Special Forces veteran and retired teacher. Tom had lived in the tiny town for almost 2 decades and ran the local bookshop. On the 7th of September, 1987, Tom closed up his shop at the end of the day, and along with his dog Gus, disappeared without a trace. The following year, in the summer of 1988, there was a new guy in town. 48-year-old Keith Raynard was a Chicago-based sports writer for the Daily Herald newspaper. Keith had decided to spend 3 months in Silver Plume with a view to settling there permanently with his wife if things went well. Keith was to run an antique shop as his main source of income, which he hoped would do well with the summer tourists and the through traffic the town always had. Living far away from the suburbs and running his own business had always been a dream for Keith, and since he was approaching 50 years old, he decided now was the time to give it a go. His fitness needed improving, and he had a fear of heights too. What better place to fix these issues than the dizzying trails of the Rocky Mountains? He also had another item on his bucket list. Keith had always wanted to write a novel, and the solitude this break from suburbia would provide was the perfect opportunity to make this dream a reality. So, encouraged by his childhood friend Ted Parker, in the June of 1988, Keith found himself in his very own antique shop, situated on Main Street, in the little old town of Silver Plume. A couple of weeks went by. Keith did odd bits of writing and poetry, but he hadn't made much progress with his novel. His childhood friend Ted owned the cafe next door. The boys had grown up across the street from each other, and had been lifelong friends. Through visiting the cafe and chatting to various people, Keith learned the story of the strange disappearance of Tom Young the previous year. Tom had told people that he was planning a trip to Europe, so it was several weeks before the alarm was raised, and anybody realized he was actually missing. It turns out Tom's vehicle hadn't left Silver Plume, and his dog Gus wasn't booked into the kennels he usually would be if Tom was out of town. Furthermore, his mother told investigators that he had never told her about any trips to Europe. Among all the things he learned about the strange disappearance, Keith also discovered that the shop he was now occupying used to be Tom's bookshop. He soon became obsessed with the story and the mystery surrounding Tom's disappearance, finally deciding it would be the perfect basis for his novel. The character he named Guy Gypsum became the protagonist of the story, and was basically a mixture of Tom Young and himself. Keith spent a lot of time writing, and soon began to blur the lines between reality and fiction. His daughter said that he liked to immerse himself in his stories and experience what his characters felt. You might say it was a kind of writer's version of method acting. Almost 2 months went by, when, on July 31st, 1988, 2 men hunting on the nearby Republican Mountain discovered both human and canine remains, which were soon identified by police as Tom Young and his dog Gus. The gaping holes found in their skulls made it clear that they had each died from a single shot to the head. A gun was found at the scene, and further investigation revealed that Tom had purchased a firearm only 4 days before he vanished from Silver Plume. Tom's case was closed. The coroner's office and the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department ruled that Tom had first taken the life of his beloved dog Gus, before turning the gun on himself. A week later, on August 7th, Keith Reinhardt closed his antiques shop early at around 2:30 p.m. He then walked around Silver Plume and told several people that he was planning to climb nearby Pendleton Mountain. Most people didn't believe him, knowing that he had a fear of heights and did not like climbing alone. It was late afternoon when he stopped by his friend Ted's cafe and told him his plans and declared that he was going to reach the top of the mountain. Keith said that if he didn't return, Ted should call on the rescue. He then said goodbye and left, but Ted did not take him seriously. Keith was last seen walking towards Pendleton Mountain, sometime between 4:30 and 5 p.m. Far too late to start a hard hike that would normally take 6 hours. He was dressed in casual clothes, wearing a flannel shirt, blue jeans and tennis shoes, with no rucksack, supplies, or a single piece of equipment. He did not return that night, and the next day, helicopters were sent to search Pendleton Mountain. Colorado's Alpine Rescue Team launched a massive search and rescue mission, and over 200 volunteers scoured the mountain for 7 days. During this time, a Civil Air Patrol plane crashed into the mountain while searching for Keith, seriously injuring the spotter, Don Drobny, and tragically killing the pilot, Terry Leedens. Despite everyone's best efforts and what turned out to be the largest search and rescue mission in Colorado's history, no trace of Keith could be found, nor any clues or evidence to provide a clearer picture of what may have happened to the would-be author. A search of his property revealed a newspaper next to Keith's computer with the headline, "Tom Young's Body Found." Hauntingly, the computer still showed Keith's unfinished book on the screen, and the final paragraph read, "Guy Gypsum changed into some hiking boots and donned a heavy flannel shirt." He understood Tom now and his motivation. Guy closed the door, then walked off towards the lush, shadowless Colorado forest above. Many people believe that Keith did exactly that. He went out to the mountain wilderness for exactly the same reason Tom did. But Keith's wife Carolyn was adamant that her husband was not capable of such a thing. She said he was such an upbeat and positive person, and always promoted a positive mental attitude. He had too many friends and family members and too much to live for. Another theory is that Keith staged everything so he could disappear and start a new life, that he was having a midlife crisis and wanted to run away and start with a clean slate. Other than circumstantial speculation, the only other supporting detail is that Keith had allegedly been talking to an unknown woman at a party the night before he went missing. However, according to a family friend, this woman was eventually found and questioned about Keith, but she had no further information. The most out there theory we came across is one that links the disappearances of Tom and Keith to their building, the bookshop and antique shop they both worked in. While researching the topic, I have to say it reminded me very much of The Shining, the movie and book by Stephen King, where fictional writer Jack Torrance is slowly driven insane by a creepy building, which happens to be set in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado too. That being said, as one online commenter suggested, it's far more likely that an environmental factor, like carbon monoxide or some other kind of low-level toxic exposure over the course of weeks, would be responsible rather than a paranormal explanation. Many people close to the case, including friends and family, believe Keith and Tom were murdered.
But some have doubts. I think my dad stumbled across something, and he just knew too much.
It's unclear if the building had any connection with this, or if it was just a coincidence, but 3 pieces of information add merit to the murder theory. The first is the fact that Tom Young's gun was so badly corroded, investigators could not ballistically match the bullets in the gun found at the scene. The second piece of information is that allegedly, bits of an old green tarpaulin sheet were found on or near Tom's remains, suggesting they may have been hidden from sight by a third party. And finally, an article in the Chicago Sun-Times 10 years later, in August of 1998, mentions the allegations of a California-based journalist who alleges that they uncovered evidence that a major multinational defense contractor had been illegally dumping plutonium in the abandoned Colorado silver mines. If this was in
alive today. Me, Rick Flair. It's Rick Flair! Woo! Oh, girls, I can't stand it. Well, they're hot today, aren't they? I can talk about all the women I have. I've got cars like women all over the countryside. Women, I have to fulfill all the dreams, the desires, the wishes, and the lusts of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And Tony Schiavone, if you don't think I wasn't driving some women wild down there, then you don't call me Ric Flair ever again. A full sweater and an empty head. I like those double D's, brother. You know what I'm telling you? You like that girl? That's how it goes. All the girls hollering, stop! We can't take anymore. The back, I go, woo! And they go, woo, woo, woo! Because they know they've been for the world champion. Ric Flair has wooed every good-looking woman alive today. And I am going to continue to woo every good-looking woman for one thing together. From penthouse to penthouse to penthouse. Call it as you see it, girls. Call it as you see it. And I'm supposed to be a bad guy, huh? I'm still gonna kiss the girls and make them cry. Woo! Hey, the girls tell me you need these bags. You jump in your limousine and ooh la la. Woo! Making $1 million a year, passing through life in jet airplanes, limousines, buying clothes, and any woman in the world I want, just like that. But now I know why they call you Baseball. I tell you how I came by that handle. One night a woman, woo, just screamed out. It's like, woo, Space Mountain. Rick, Space Mountain, if you may. I am Space Mountain. Space Mountain was lit up like a huge